think we are going to get started so we can stay on schedule. Appreciate everybody. So welcome to the Public Transit Safety and Security Summit on this glorious spring day, even though it's not quite spring, it certainly feels like spring, doesn't it? I am Leanne Redden. I am the Executive Director of the Regional Transportation Authority and wanted to welcome you here today. So glad that all of you were able to join us and give us some time as we talk through this very important topic. And I think it's super important because as you've seen by your table, everyone shares very different experiences and bringing different perspectives, and that's by design as we talk about this very complex and challenging issue. If you have not visited the registration table, please do so, but it looks like most people have a name tag on. And if you are not sitting at your assigned table, I would ask you to get a name tag, work out what table you're at, and move to that table. So there is a table number assigned to you on your name tag. And that's for a very specific purpose, and people can point you in that right direction. A couple of housekeeping items as we get started. Lunch, I think most people have already found lunch as they walked in the door, so there are veggie and gluten-free options, so please feel free to take one, maybe even take a second if there's still a few available. We want you to stay fueled up for the afternoon's conversation so everyone stays engaged. If you are looking for a program or other materials for the summit, we are going green. So we ask that you use your phone. There are QR codes and a web address at each table, so you can scan those and that will have any of the materials that they are using, and I think there might be one or two printed versions of that as well on the table. While we're looking at our phones, can I ask that everyone actually just take a moment to silence them so it's not disruptive as we go through the rest of the conversations in the room. If you do have to take calls, I know everyone's busy, please, we just ask that we step outside to answer that call so not to further disrupt the discussions. I also want to take a moment just to note the exits. If we do have to leave in an emergency, you go straight out these doors, down the stairs, and essentially do a U-turn and head out to Randolph Street, which is the primary exit and the quickest exit to evacuate the building if necessary. You will see that we are taking photographs and filming today. We are recording the first half of today's event, including the presentations and the panel discussion, but we are not recording the second half, which is the group discussions that will be having at the tables. It also brings me to an important point, that making sure that you are at your assigned tables. Our goal for this event is to make some immediate impacts on some possible ways to improve safety and security across our transit system. And we've invited each of you here today because you bring a very unique perspective, and we have grouped people who do similar. Is anyone else getting feedback, or is it just me? Grouped people who do similar work but maybe have some varied interests to that table, so it'll have to engage in a robust conversation. There's also a note taker and a facilitator to support those discussions when we get to that point in the afternoon. We've tried to place you at tables with others who can inform and further the work, and we hope that once you make those connections, that you'll have some great opportunities to address some of those ongoing challenges and, more importantly, solutions. And we also have the events as summarized. At the end of this, we're planning to sort of summarize the activities of the day and report out, and we will share that information with you as we get to that point. The goal, again, is to ensure that we're supporting strategies and policies that can make an impact. And we'll have more instructions about the breakout sessions in a little bit, but I wanted to just give you a little bit of insights as to why you may be not sitting with some of your colleagues or your co-workers and friends. For those of you who may be meeting us for the first time, we are the Regional Transportation Authority, or the RTA, and we are the funding and oversight agency for CTA, Metra, and PACE, who we refer to as the service boards, who are the transit operators in our region. Collectively, Chicago's regional system is one of the largest in the US, providing more than 1 million passenger trips on a typical weekday. And we're a very large system serving a very broad and diverse region. And the RTA as an agency, though, is a relatively small organization. We often play the role of convener and advocate and support for the three operators as they do the work that they do. And in that role of being sort of convener and advocate is sort of the hat that the RTA is wearing today. About a year ago to this month, the RTA adopted a strategic plan called Transit is the Answer that was co-created by hundreds of stakeholders, riders, and advocates. As many of you probably know, because some of you actually worked with us on that effort, we gathered riders and community members, transit professionals for an entire summer of meetings in 2022, as well as additionally doing surveys, virtual town halls, and outreach across the entire region. During that engagement, one thing stood out as a top priority among everyone who we solicited feedback from. Improving safety and security on the system was critical. So holding this summit topped our list of implementation activities, and we are deeply grateful for so many of you who have provided ideas on the planning and the structure of this event today. I want to emphasize that we are here to focus primarily on personal security and public safety, on transit for our riders and frontline workers. This topic has also been the most frequent concern raised by lawmakers as we discuss the need to increase public funding for transit operations. Legislators tell us that we need to make rider-focused safety improvements for them to commit new funding, and we are all working together to achieve that progress. We've heard these calls loud and clear, and our principle really and our guide in all of this is very firm, that we believe every rider and operator deserves to feel safe on transit. Each of you are directly impacted by the reality, or even if the perception of crime or concern around safety on transit every day, because you are either a system user, because you're an operator, you employ operators, or you're someone who's impacted, because the community, or you could be related to family or community members who are victims of crime, or who simply just don't feel safe riding transit. Or because you're an organization that you work for provides services for vulnerable users of the system. So I don't mean to diminish the lived experiences of those who are impacted by crime or lack of safety on transit when I say that crime on transit is not just a Chicago issue, it is a transit issue across the entire nation. You're going to hear from some panelists today who have joined us from Los Angeles and Minneapolis to highlight the fact that this is a national issue, impacting transit agencies of all sizes who are struggling with a set of interconnected crises rooted in decades of underfunding that include labor shortages and reduced ridership, and those things have been exacerbated by the pandemic. While the statistics around crime fluctuates within our city and surrounding it, crime, be it petty or serious, is a societal issue, and transit happens to be a public space that by its nature brings the world happening outside a station or a vehicle inside of it. Transit's openness, consistency, and the vastness of our system offer an inviting space for activities which are inconsistent with its main purpose, which is getting people to their destinations quickly and safely. That said, city government and our transit agencies clearly have a strong role to play in making sure every rider and operator feels and is safe riding. And I know I speak for every transit professional in this room when I say that is our greatest desire to do just that. We can't do this alone, and no agency or organization here, be it police, social services, transit operators, mayors, or legislators, we must work together to double down on what we know is working, to solicit feedback, and to listen to users of the system about ways to improve and where it is possible to explore new ideas and strategies. By a show of hands, this is the participatory part, how many of you are regular transit riders of our transit system? Great to see, thank you. And that's, I think, really important. Operators and riders who are most dependent on the system are the most impacted, not just by crime, but the feeling of being unsafe, or even the news coverage of a station or a route in their community as being unsafe. and we must center their voices and experiences in this work. As I mentioned before, it is riders and representatives of community-based organization in our strategic plan working groups that prioritize this issue for us. Since then, we have been improving safety and security as a topic for discussions and feedback at our public Transit is the Answer Coalition sessions, as well as recently adding 11 new members to our agency's Citizens Advisory Board. 10 of them are everyday riders, unaffiliated with any government organization. And because we deeply value the perspective they bring, we're committed to offering compensation to those riders and community-based leaders for their expertise and engagement with us. I want to just take a moment to thank each of you in this room who took part in our strategic plan development and who are attending our coalition meetings and continue to provide us feedback because it's really critical for us. I just want to close with a couple of quick thoughts. One incident of crime on a bus or a train, one unhoused person in need of attention, one car with cigarette smoke is too many. Our ultimate goal is a system that is safe, clean, and reliable for every trip, for every rider. But with that said, it is vital that we acknowledge what is working. Crime is down across the system. The enormous efforts of the agencies, CTA, Metra, and PACE, that they're making are actually working. What we're here to do today is to learn and listen from each other about how we can do even better. Our approach with today's summit is to keep this discussion here within the 3 topic areas. First one is enhancing personal security and addressing perception of crime on transit. The second is incorporating transit-specific strategies into social service initiatives. And the third is creating safer, more welcoming environments in transit stations and stops. Your table assignments and later breakout discussions will reflect those topic areas, and you'll hear a little bit more about that as we get to before we actually do have the panel discussions. I will close with an announcement related to creating safer areas around transit stations and stops. Every year, the RTA provides funding and technical assistance to foster more equitable and transit-friendly communities. We do this by issuing a call for projects to fund, and yesterday, we opened that call for projects. For the first time, actually, this call includes a pilot program for what we're calling station activation, which can mean a lot of different things to different people, but at its core, it's making the space around transit stations and stops more inviting for people through physical improvements or cultural programming. This pilot was born of the need we heard from so many riders and community members that feeling safe on transit begins with feeling safe outside the station or the stops. I want to take a moment to recognize the outgoing leader of Elevated Chicago, Roberto Riquelme. I'm not sure where is Roberto. Oh, there he is. And I want to thank him for his long career in this area and his strong advocacy for transit over his career and in his future roles. So thanks, Roberto. We are also joined today by many coalition members, board members from the RTA, leadership and staff from Governor Pritzker's office and Mayor Johnson's office, suburban leaders, and of course, leaders from our service boards. And I want to thank you all for prioritizing time and joining us today and prioritizing transit. Our collective goal today is to walk out of this summit with some tangible 2024 action items in mind to improve public safety on transit in the near term. With that, I am going to ask Arian Gatewood, City of Chicago Deputy Mayor of Community Safety, to offer a few remarks. And followed by that, we will be joined by Senator Ram Vilivalam, who will speak before we kick off the panel. So, Deputy, oh, there you are. Thank you.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are we doing today?
Excellent.
Good, good. So I'm so pleased to be here today on behalf of Mayor Johnson to welcome you to the Public Transit Safety and Security Summit. I will tell you the timing of this is impeccable because tonight at 11, the mayor will be taking a ride on the CTA on the Blue Line from Clark and Lake down to O'Hara, so he can go and see folks and understand some of the services that are not only needed on CTA, how Haymarket is working, and how we really take a holistic approach to safety. So we're excited about that piece, and again, like I said, the timing on that is impeccable. Together with RTA, CTA, Metra, PACE, and suburban municipalities, the City of Chicago is committed to working holistically to improve safety across the region's public transit system. One of Mayor Johnson's first acts when he came into office was to create the first ever Office of Community Safety and the first ever Deputy Mayor of Community Safety. I'm Gary Gatewood. So as you all know, safety is a huge priority of ours as we think about how we chart paths forward, and we have challenged folks to think about safety from a holistic perspective, not just from a police response perspective or a typical public safety apparatus perspective. Some of the folks in here know well that we pull together a community safety cabinet, which calls every city agency to come together to think about the role that we all play in safety bi-weekly. Originally, we were asked to do that through the consent decree, and they required us to meet quarterly, 4 times a year. Instead, we actually meet 24 times a year. And I hope that the folks who are in those meetings are still enjoying those, because I'm still enjoying them myself, because really it is how we think about safety from a different and a holistic perspective. I think historically we have asked police to do too much. We continue to ask the police to do too much. So instead of doing that, we've tried to chart new paths to think about not only providing them the support that's necessary, but also providing resources to alternatives to provide help and support. You know, a lot of us have rode transit for a wide majority of our lives, and we understand that there's a need for a stronger safety system there. We understand that sharing numbers on data on how crime is trending downward on safety is great, but people need to feel safe when they're riding trains, right? We can share numbers like safety on the trains, violent crime on trains is down 30% from last year on CTA, but for that one person who may be robbed or hurt on the train, those numbers don't matter. We have to get to a place where we are not only providing the support that is necessary, but also being intentional about what that means long term. We also have to be very thoughtful around how we collaborate, not only with our partners in the city, but our partners broadly. So I'm glad we're having this summit today. We're excited about this conversation and this holistic approach to safety, because the holistic approach to safety is the only way we move in a different direction. I'm excited about this summit. I'm excited about the conversations we're going to have today, and I'm looking forward to it. So with that, I think I'll pass it over to you, Ron. So we'll call up State Senator Ron Villavon to get us rolling.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you so much to RTA and the Deputy Mayor for that welcome. I'll start by saying that I typically have a joke to start off my remarks. My wife came to the last event I spoke at, and she said, "No more jokes." So maybe that'll serve as my joke for this event. It's great to be here. I want to thank RTA for putting this on, for taking this issue as seriously as they are. And, you know, it cannot be underscored. In the Illinois General Assembly, there's a lot that happens, and we deal with 100 different issues every day. And one of the concerns I've had as Chair of Transportation for 4 years is how do we get legislators focused on transit, focused on this issue? And I will say, through the work that RTA, CTA, Metra, PACE, all of the advocates, CMAP, and others, I have legislators coming up to me constantly now asking, how are we going to approach this? What can I do to help? And that is a huge sea change in just a few years. So I want to thank you all for the work that you're doing. I want to thank everyone here that works in the system, that keeps our public transit system going. Just more broadly for a minute, I very much view this as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to plan our public transit system that is so incredibly vital to our region for the year 2050 and beyond. And I am so proud of the fact that we're convening and making sure that we're hunting down every policy area, every policy initiative, every challenge that we've come across or heard about. I will also tell you just a quick tidbit on the Illinois General Assembly. Sometimes some people would say it's a challenging place. It is 177 legislators that are focused on a number of different issues, and we all have our own answers to everything. I would just say that the tone that we've tried to set as Chair of Transportation in the Senate is one of steadiness on this issue. Because of the work the service boards and RTA has done, we have been able to secure enough time to have this conversation in a steady and a due diligence type of way. And I think that's going to be incredibly vital as we move forward and have committee hearings and look towards solutions. On safety and security, I would just say, and I'm going to keep my remarks more brief. I think this is an issue, as Leanne mentioned, and I'll take a step back and say, I think there is a change in the Illinois General Assembly in terms of how we view voting for revenue. Before, it was seen as a really tough vote in general, and it's something that people really did not want to discuss, let alone do, in a lot of times. Now, I think that the approach is we are much more open to voting for the funding that's needed. However, we want to see the results in that funding, and that's what our constituents ask of us. So with that said, as Leanne mentioned, safety and security is one of those issues where we hear time and time again from our constituents about the concern. And I think, again, Leanne said it perfectly. It's if you look at the data, the statistics, it's very much trending in the right direction. That being said, it's incredibly hard to make that argument to someone that's experienced a safety incident on one of the transit systems or outside a train station or a public transit station. And so the way I look at it is there's two challenges, right? The elusivity of the issue, right? How do we ensure people feel safe, right? We want to ensure that the data and statistics are trending in the right direction and we're taking those steps. But a lot of it is making sure people feel safe. And that is challenging, to say the least. I think the other piece, and the Deputy Mayor touched on it, is we deal with the reality that there's a variety of opinions on public safety across the spectrum in terms of how we approach this issue in general, right, in our communities. And so how do we balance those perspectives and achieving, a solution that is one that is holistic and one that also ensures that, people don't feel like there's an incident and then it happens again and it happens again and it happens again. And so I view those as the challenges, and I very much view how my mind thinks about this issue is clarity, transparency, and results. I think the general public needs to understand what the strategy is, and there needs to be clarity there. I think transparency on the strategies that are being implemented, and accountability for that matter. And then obviously results, making sure that whatever strategy we're implementing, we're able to show a track record of results and really highlight that as the way that we're dealing with this issue. And I'll end by saying that obviously we all know that one of the best ways to achieve safety and security is more ridership. And so as we have this conversation, we know that the connectivity that it has to all the other issues that we discuss as it relates to public transit. I'll end by saying you all have a partner in me. You have an ally, someone that is taking this on in the Illinois Senate and the Illinois General Assembly. I am excited about today because unlike some of my colleagues or former colleagues, I will say I don't have the answers. I am not the experts that we're going to hear from today. And so to be able to be a part of this discussion, hear the comments from people that are living this and breathing this every day, as truly valuable, and I will take that back to the Illinois General Assembly. So thank you so much again for having me.
So thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Senator, for joining us and providing us with those remarks. And now we will dive right in, and I will turn the mic over to Flora Castillo, who is going to introduce our panel and lead that discussion. But Flora herself has been very involved in the transit industry for many years and has worked very closely with multiple agencies on this very topic. So I will let her introduce the panelists. Thanks, Flora.
Great. Thank you. Can you hear me? Is that okay over there? Okay, great. Thank you, Leanne, and to the RTA team, PACE, CTA, and all those of you who have made a decision to join us here this afternoon on behalf of our panel. I would like to thank you and welcome. My name is Flora Castillo. As Leanne said, I am president of Pivot Strategies, and I've been at the intersection of this issue for almost 20, 30 years, 20 years within a policymaking role that I had as a board member of New Jersey Transit. I intersected with this issue in my healthcare career. And now, as a small business owner, I have focused on this issue to try to help the industry and those agencies who are looking for all types of solutions. And as both the deputy mayor and the senator said, we definitely need holistic solutions. For us as a transit industry, this issue, it has found us. It has found our systems. It has found our bus shelters. It has found our stations. And so, as you will hear today from our panelists, we've been dealing to the best that we can in trying to find innovative and creative ways to address this societal issue, as it was mentioned by both Leanne and the senator, that is really impacting our transit agencies across the country. I don't know that we would ever have thought that we would be dealing with such a complex, public health crisis issues as we are now, but clearly, some agencies are also dealing with the effects of the impact of the opiate and the fentanyl crisis. We're seeing more visible behavioral health issues manifest through our systems. We're also seeing increase in assaults, as it was noted earlier, on our frontline employees, and the increases of homelessness or those individuals who are experiencing homelessness that are sheltering in our systems. And it was also mentioned in terms of the ebb and flow of the crime on our systems. Clearly, as Leanne noted, we need healthy public transit systems, right? Violence and disorder, whether it's actual or perceived, undermine the value and the potential of our public transit systems across the country, but more importantly here in the region. We know that our leaders from here at CTA, RTA, PACE, and Metra have been partnering with their security and safety personnel to look at ways to address this issue collectively. This response is not only here but also across the country, range from developing joint agreements on coordination on security to multi-partner programs with outreach workers, crisis response staff, and in some cases, offering social service provision in the systems. Our panelists today will share with you how they are addressing these challenging issues in their jurisdictions, and I'm pleased to help me welcome two of our thought leaders. They were selected because all of us are in it together, and they have been leading with some innovative approaches. Clearly, their jurisdictions are different, and so through our conversation today, we hope that you get that. The goal of the summit, as Leanne mentioned, is for us to leave here with concrete steps to collectively improve the transit rider experience, but really focusing on the safety issues and how we can contribute to these discussions that are happening as a region. To get us started with our conversation, I'd love to invite our panelists to introduce themselves and to just share with us as they do so, how present are safety and security issues in your discussions within your service areas. Want to
Want me
start?
to start? All right. Thank you, Flora. So good afternoon. My name is Leslie Kandaris, and I am the General Manager of Metro Transit in Minneapolis-St. Paul, Minnesota. And I want to start by thanking RTA for inviting me to participate today. When I heard about this event, I was very eager to join you because we are working on this issue each and every day, and we have a lot of initiatives underway. We're trying some new things, but we also have a long way to go. Every day as general manager, I hear from our riders, I hear from our employees, I hear from the public generally about their concerns regarding public safety on transit. So just a little background about Metro Transit. So again, we're in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area of Minnesota. The 7-county metro is just over 3 million people, so smaller than here. Metro Transit, in addition to serving Minneapolis-St. Paul, serves about 70 other communities in the metro. We run bus service, bus rapid transit, light rail, and commuter rail. And our bus rapid transit, light rail, and commuter rail are all off-board payment. And so as we talk further about some of our strategies, one piece that we're looking at is fare compliance and fare inspection, since people aren't paying their fare on board or don't have to go through turnstiles to board. Right now, we are providing, well, I should say in 2023, we provided just shy of 45 million rides, and that's not quite 60% of where we were pre-pandemic. So we still are working to rebuild ridership. The good news is in 2023, we grew ridership about 15-16% compared to what we were in 2022. But as we talk about public safety, we feel that's going to be a key piece in rebuilding ridership even further. I'll also mention more from a policy side. So Metro Transit is part of a broader regional government organization in the Twin Cities called the Metropolitan Council. The Metropolitan Council as a whole is also our MPO. A different part of the council, the Metro Transit provides our paratransit service. The board of the Metropolitan Council is comprised of 17 people, all appointed by the governor of Minnesota. So we, while we're not a state agency, we are considered part of the governor's cabinet and work closely with the state legislature on transit policy and funding. And I'll just conclude by saying, while we've been working on safety and security issues for many years, in 2020, following the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officers in Minneapolis, the chair of our council called on the council to review our police department. So Metro Transit, we have our own police department with full-time sworn officers. And that 2020 announcement kicked off a review that began with deep community engagement that lasted about a year or so, and ultimately led to the development of our current safety and security action plan. And that action plan is comprised of over 40 action items that we have in some stage of implementation now, organized around 3 areas of work: improving conditions on the system, which includes work to boost presence in a holistic way, as well as facilities improvements. The second area of work is really focused on our own employees and making sure they have the skills and resources and support given they're facing challenging environments right now. And then the third area is around partnering with customers and other partners to get more at the underlying causes of some of the issues we're seeing on our system. So I look forward to sharing more about all of that as the panel progresses.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. Stephen?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us here, RTA, and all of the key stakeholders here, CTA, PACE, Metra, and some of our advocacy groups and other CBOs here. My name is Stephen Tu. I am the Deputy Executive Officer of a new unit in LA Metro called Station Experience, and this is a new unit where we have been looking to pair tactical interventions, environmental design interventions with care-centered strategies, human-centered strategies, and a lot of that really kick-started back in 2020 with our board of directors authorizing $40 million in jump-starting a lot of the multi-layered strategy approach to combating a lot of the issues that we're seeing on the West Coast. So not just homelessness, but we're talking about drug addiction, we're talking about sex crimes, we're talking about a lot of different issues that can be very visible in a public setting like the public transit system. Size-wise, I think we're very similar to CTA. We're oftentimes considered friendly rivals in the ridership trends. I think right now, technically, we're number 2 in the nation in total system ridership. All of us, both of us behind New York. Right now, we're moving about 900,000 people per day on any given day. Most of that recovery has been on the bus side. We're about 90% recovered on bus and about 65% recovered on rail. And so I think I'm really excited to be able to dig into this a little bit deeper, not only share out what we have learned and done in Los Angeles, but to learn from all of you, especially in our breakout sessions, to be able to roll up our sleeves and take this on.
Thank you, Stephen. So we're going to have 4 categories that we're going to focus our conversation on, and then we're going to open it up for questions from you all. So we're going to start with the personal safety and security area. Leslie, it sounds like you have a really robust plan. So oftentimes we hear, people, customers, advocates asking for, an increased level of security and supplemental law enforcement personnel. Can you speak how that sat within the development of your plan, but more importantly, how is that, are there any pluses or minuses, and what went into your decision to implement it?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I mentioned that we developed the Safety and Security Action Plan following extensive community engagement. And one of the themes that came out of that community engagement, as well as employee engagement too, was visible official presence leads people to feel safer on transit. Now, there is not consensus about what type of presence people prefer necessarily, and so really our approach over the last few years has been to create a more holistic set of layers of presence on our system. So I mentioned earlier that Metro Transit has a police department with sworn full-time officers. That police department's been in place for 30 years now, and that historically had been our security on our transit system. Starting last year, we expanded the layers to different types of non-sworn personnel. That includes our community service officers, which are police department employees but are not sworn. They're students pursuing a career in law enforcement and have become more visible on our system. And have now taken on a role inspecting fares. Another layer we added within the last year is supplemental security presence. We contracted with a private security provider to provide security we now have it at 7 different locations, really based on customer and employee feedback of where we felt we needed those eyes and ears present at all times. And then last year, the state legislature of Minnesota passed a few different provisions pertaining to public safety on transit. One was a project they called the Transit Service Intervention Project that was required by state law to kick off on June 1st. Keep in mind, our session ended, I think, on May 22nd, so it was a quick turnaround. But the idea of that intervention project was to have us seek the participation of cities, counties, and some other organizations related to our light rail specifically, and also provided some funding that's allowed us to contract now with 10 different community-based organizations to provide social service outreach and connections on our system. So that work is underway and is still within its first several months. And then the newest layer of presence we've introduced just within the last week is from our Transit Rider Investment Program, another part of state legislation last year, abbreviated TRIP. And one piece of that is to create, again, non-sworn personnel that are not part of our police department who inspect fares, write administrative citations for fare noncompliance, educate riders on our code of conduct, and also are trained to provide customer information, connections to services, and so forth. So that's a long way of saying really where our focus has been is building up additional layers to supplement the work of our police department. And I'll mention that one of our challenges across all those layers is workforce and having enough people on the system to be that visible presence. People tell us they feel makes them safer or more comfortable riding. And so that's a piece of this for us as well. So.
Yeah, so if I could add, I think from the Los Angeles context, just a little tidbit, if you've never ridden one of our Metro trains in Los Angeles, we do not have station agents. We've never had the way that our stations were designed were to be fully automated from the vending machine to the platforms to the announcements. And fast forward to when the stations were designed in the 80s to where we are today in 2024, the need for human-centered approaches is readily evident. Our custodians oftentimes get asked tons of questions, basic questions that a station agent could answer or a customer ambassador could answer. And so as part of our refocusing of how we can provide safety, not just through the traditional approaches, but also bringing in other elements like our ambassadors. So we now have, over the course of the last year or so, about 330 ambassadors that are fanned out throughout our system, both rail and on bus. And they're essentially the face, the welcoming face of our system. But I think it's really clear that I do want to emphasize they are not a substitute for law enforcement. They are not there to intervene or respond to criminal activity. They can be there to help set the tone for how behavior should be. But for someone who is acting irrationally or anti-socially, they have the tools to be able to observe those and connect to the other teams. And so to that end, the other approach that we have are a new collaboration of a homeless outreach team, which is not a traditional just pair of people walking a platform, but really there's 5 people that are part of each what we call multidisciplinary team, or MDT. There's total of over 100 people that are now part of that force, but one of them is a social worker, mental health specialist, a substance use specialist, outreach worker with lived experiences, and healthcare workers, perhaps a registered nurse. And so we are able to respond with the right tool for the right situation and not necessarily leave that person behind, because we know anyone that's in our system, who's sheltering in our system or is suffering from addiction, is not getting better, especially when they're in our system, riding the trains or in our stations. And so that is the piece that all then pairs to our law enforcement partners. In Los Angeles, we contract with a number of different departments depending on the local jurisdiction. So LAPD's the big one, then the Sheriff's Department, as well as City of Long Beach PD. And so we're going through all of that as well. But it's all part of the ecosystem of public safety. The ambassadors, our homeless outreach team, our custodians keeping stations and trains clean, and our law enforcement partners.
Safety can be understood as a matter of perception. You know, we heard Deputy Mayor Gatewood mention that, you know, while, and Leanne also mentioned while crime is going down, the perception, you know, is a personal one. And so I wanted to just ask how your agencies are combating the safety misrepresentations that, you know, clearly are influencing, you know, ridership, right? There are individuals choosing not, you know, they're choosing to drive over taking transit because of that perception. And, you know, if you can speak to any data that you're using to sort of inform how you're telling that story.
Well, this question about the perception of public safety is really a challenge that I feel we're still working through, to be really honest. I think we've looked at our customer satisfaction surveys, and over the past few years, we have seen a decline in people agreeing with the statement that they feel safe while riding and safe while waiting. So definitely that is a concern of ours, and to the point that a few have made now, the data is important, but that's not a substitute for how people feel and their own experience on the system. And so that's a very real set of facts that we're continuing to work through. I think part of what we do to try to make people feel safer is build confidence that these are issues that we are working on. So putting a lot of emphasis in making sure we're communicating as we roll out additional actions in our safety security action plan, making a real attempt again with the presence to have more of our staff on the system in addition to all the layers of presence I mentioned earlier. We've started a regular program of having staff sign up to take shifts on our system and be out interacting with customers, sharing information. That's also been an opportunity to survey people about what additional improvements we can be making. And then some of it too is going back to some of the community engagement that we drew upon when forming our safety and security action plan. People tell us this feeling safe is a lot more than enforcement alone. They told us the lighting at stations, the area leading up to transit property is a big influence. The frequency of our service, due to our workforce shortages on our operator side, we aren't providing the same level of service as we were before the pandemic. And so that means people are waiting longer in some cases and may feel more vulnerable during that. So I think just understanding that there are a lot of factors that shape perception, we're trying to make sure we're addressing and communicating how we're addressing on all those fronts.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, going back to one of your earlier statements of, especially on the market research side, there's a difference between what people say they feel and what they actually do. And that is so important when we go out and do surveys and really try to understand what riders want. And we may not necessarily see it in online data. We need to go and meet people where they are, be able to survey them, get their lived experiences. And so to that end, we have been pairing, as I mentioned earlier, some tactical environmental design interventions to help our multi-layered staffing approach be successful. Some of our stations are oversized and underutilized for the post-pandemic ridership patterns. We've been consolidating entrances to improve access control, and through that has been allowed our ambassadors, our police, our security to be more visible to passengers. We've been able to add lighting to areas that were formerly dark spots where we would have trains that would go pull up to the front of the platform, but women wouldn't want to wait at the end of the platform because it's dark there. They don't know who's behind that pillar. And so we would have heavy loads in the middle of the train and empty trains at the front of the train, even where the train operator is. And so being able to brighten that area up, we've been able to do a number of those different interventions that really pair all of these together to be able to kind of turn that perception piece around, and not only seeing that in the data in terms of the ridership, but talking to them. So we surveyed nearly 600 people. One of our toughest stations, it's called MacArthur Park Station in Los Angeles. If you don't know about it, you listen to Red Hot Chili Peppers, they have a song called Under the Bridge. That bridge is rumored to be written about the one at MacArthur Park where he was dealing with heroin addiction at that time. And so that is a station that has been plagued with generational challenges of addiction, from heroin to methamphetamine to now we're dealing with fentanyl. Very intense levels of fentanyl addiction on the West Coast. And so we have been able to turn that station around, bringing fatalities down 55%, vandalism is down 60%, and most importantly, customer satisfaction is way up. 95% of the 600 people that we surveyed, 95% of them said they feel safer with the access control improvements that we've put in place. The thing that they actually want to see more when we surveyed them was more security. And so these are part of the things that are entirely important when we look at the entire ecosystem of moving the needle on public safety. We're now trying to take the best practices from that station and scale it to other stations so we can really make sure that we restore appropriate activity throughout our entire transit system.
Before we move to the social services and supportive services category, I want to just ask one quick question related to frontline employee safety systems. You spoke about workforce challenges, and so can you, maybe you, Stephen, want to start in terms of what tools or strategies are you implementing in order to increase the protection of our front lines? We know that maintenance and custodians are being assaulted, and sometimes they can't even do their job. So I was just curious what you're doing.
Yeah, we're taking a number of steps, and I think many of us transit agencies across North America have been dealing with challenges with vacancies and filling those vacancies. We have been very aggressive in not only having hiring fairs, hiring directly into full-time operators, because traditionally you would go into part-time, and so by doing that, helping to train people, but we also knew that the behavior that we're seeing post-pandemic is really something we haven't seen before. And so through that, we have been going through all of our new hires get in-person de-escalation training. All of our current employees are getting video de-escalation training, but also we're adding operator shields that are going to be securing the workspace for our bus operators, of which we have on any given day, we could have 1,300, 1,500 buses out there in the system in operation. And then also we have bus line riding teams, and so they're with, there's ambassador teams, there are law enforcement teams, there are security teams, getting on the buses, checking in with our bus operators, checking in with our riders. And we call them bus operators specifically because they don't just drive the bus. They're not just bus drivers. They're operating the whole unit, everything there from the fares to the safe operation of the passengers, the wheelchair ramp, and everything that's inside contained in that 40 or 60-foot bus. And the last thing, and I think you'll touch on this a little bit, is the all-door boarding piece. We are also moving towards opening up the rear doors and putting validators on the back doors. Reduces the amount of confrontations that there may be between bus operators at the front door. It also provides a more rail-like experience and a BRT experience. And from the customer standpoint, we think it's an improvement to customer experience because you're going to speed up those bus stop delays by getting people on and off faster, but also you're going to be able to give people more choice whether they want to go to the front of the bus or the back of the bus.
Yeah, just building on what Stephen shared, for Metro Transit, a few different pieces. Before the pandemic, we were already in the process of partnering with ATU, the labor union that represents our frontline workers, to install shields or barriers in buses because of concerns about operator assault. So we were well on our way down that path before we developed our broader safety security action plan. We've also been very mindful of providing training and support to all of our frontline staff. Resiliency training, we're in the process of revamping our de-escalation training. And also relooking at our peer support program when there are critical incidents. I think in general, certainly the headlines about transit safety, I have to imagine, are affecting our recruitment, retention. But generally what I hear from people who are working for transit, who did decide to work for us, is it is a source of constant stress too. So a lot of our focus is how within our agency we can give people those tools and support to stay safe, but also to not burn out in these situations. So.
Yeah, definitely. You both spoke about how wonderful you've been able to implement transit ambassadors recently. So I know that in addressing the issue of people experiencing homelessness, mental health, behavioral health issues, and you spoke of the addiction and the fentanyl. Can you talk to us about or share what kind of partnerships you have implemented or are thinking about in terms of those issues are not in our wheelhouse, if you will. Can you speak to how you're approaching that? Who's at the table? Who you wish would be at the table that is not, and how you're funding? Because clearly, some agencies are funding this out of their general fund. They don't have dedicated sources. So if you can touch on that as well, would be great. Want to start?
Sure. So at Metro Transit, we have a few different pieces that pertain to social services. Back in 2018, our police department first formed a homeless action team that was comprised of sworn police officers who were specially trained to work with people experiencing homelessness on our system. They further contracted with some social service providers so they can connect people to resources. One advantage I mentioned earlier that Metro Transit is part of this broader Metropolitan Council. Another function of the council is our HRA, our Housing and Development Authority that provides federal housing assistance, no longer called really Section 8 vouchers, but our police department and our HRA formed a partnership to provide vouchers for people riding on transit, using transit as part of their shelter solution, have provided housing, not just shelter, but housing for over 400 individuals since starting that partnership. So that's been one area of work that we've had underway for several years. More recently, I mentioned earlier that the last year's state legislative session included a couple policy pieces that really grew our work in this area. One was that Transit Service Intervention Project that in the law called on us to bring together cities, counties, in particular, and try to create a more coordinated approach to this work. That also provided some funding specifically to bring on community-based organizations to really be on the front lines, riding our light rail system, trying to support people who are interested in being referred to services. So that work is still pretty new, and I think we're learning really as a transit agency what our role is, what our partners' roles are, and how we can optimize that. And then this newest piece that I mentioned earlier with the Transit Rider Investment Program agents or TRIP agents, their primary purpose is not social services, but they are being trained to interface or connect with both that homeless action team and the providers as part of the Transit Service Intervention Project. So there'll be another group of people interacting with customers, hopefully creating a welcoming environment and if needed, provide that warm handoff to different personnel who's more plugged into the social service work. Steve?
Yeah, I think importantly for us as transit agencies, we have to recenter our mission to get back to the basics, that we are delivering, as you mentioned, Flora, safe, reliable service to the public and to keep our employees safe as well. And so when we rethink about that, we know that our stations and our trains and our buses need to be restored for appropriate activity. So to that end, we have, as I mentioned, the homeless outreach team that is multi-pronged, and part of that builds on a collaborative approach with the city, the county, and the community, or what we call C3. And that has really been a new program that we have started up in Los Angeles, across Los Angeles County, the city of Los Angeles, and then the community and us as Metro. That has been really helpful to I think, have everyone have skin in the game at the table, to be able to help focus on specifically the types of issues that we're dealing with on the transit system. But I think as we're going forward with the program, we understand that there's also, as a transit agency, a benefit when you do have more control as well. We're seeing that with the ambassadors. When an incident happens or you see data taking you into one direction, it's easy for us as the agency to pivot in that way. The county may not feel that way, the city may not feel that way, and so having to get everyone in the same direction when it's a very dynamic situation can also be challenging with those types of cross-jurisdictional type of collaboration. And so these are the kind of things that we're learning as we go along in this. And I'd also say that part of this, again, going back to the environmental design interventions, really help, particularly because we know that everyone that gets offered services does not accept them. There are an element of folks, especially in Los Angeles, I think we talked about this, where weather is a little bit more mild. You don't have to necessarily find heat and shelter and cover to be able to live on our system. And so To that end, we are really trying to take on environmental design interventions through lighting upgrades. We didn't know this when we did this. One of the things we want to do in our subway stations, we start pumping in fresh air into the stations because people were complaining about smoking and fumes and that sort of thing. Well, what it ended up doing, and this was actually reported in the LA Times, one of the articles in the couple months after, is that it reduced the amount of fentanyl use in the stations because a drug user's fentanyl grams were blowing away in the air breeze. And so when you're thinking about some of the things as we learn and go along through this, we know that someone that is suffering from addiction with opioids or other narcotics is not getting better in our system. We can better connect them there on the street level outside rather than underground in our station.
Excellent. Now we'll move to our station environment. And Stephen, you spoke about the environmental design interventions that you've done. I love the fact that you're now infusing, I think, classical music, I believe, through some of your stations. So besides that, how are you thinking about what else we need to do related to those access points that we need to make more welcome, not only for our riders, right, but also our employees, because they spending 8-12 hours there. Can you talk about what additional strategies you're looking at, and again, how are you able to fund those improvements?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So I think it all starts with your station entrance. I think that's what we've learned. It is the first face that any member of the public sees. I think one of the challenges that we've had with a lot of our station designs is only about 45%, give or take, of our stations have fare gates, an actual access control mechanism. The remaining 55% of stations are ungated. They go on an honor system where we ask you to tap a validator on the side of the platform, and then you can get on board. There is strong data that we've seen that from our local law enforcement that about 9 in 10 of those that they're arresting do not have valid fare. And so I want to be clear, this is not to say that all fare evaders are criminals, but it is to say that a lot of the criminals that are being arrested by our law enforcement partners are evading fare. And so we see this as an opportunity for us to really restore fare compliance as sort of the first part of the station entrance. But part of this, really important, is the equity component. And so our board has also put in a really robust low-income fare is easy program. It's LIFE, stands for LIFE. So it's the LIFE program that provides 2 months of free unlimited rides on Metro, and you can sign up on the spot. We do that at the same locations that we start to improve our access control and our fare compliance. So people with legitimate mobility needs can get through and get that access and then get significant discounts afterwards, because this isn't about making more revenue, this is about improving public safety. And again, when we surveyed our passengers, one of the things that we had seen from the actual riders, in which 9 out of 10 identified as Black or Indigenous people of color, that they actually appreciated and strongly supported and wanted to see more of the fare compliance, because if they're paying their fair share, they want to see other people doing it too. And so that is something that we are also working on. Flora mentioned a little bit about the classical music. This is not a new intervention, but it can make the news. This is something that we had seen in New York City, where they were doing this at the Port Authority bus terminal and other major hubs. But it's intended to keep people moving through the area in the same way that you would have in a shopping mall or in an elevator. And I think for us, really we are rethinking about the stations need to be a place where you can quickly and safely get to your train or your bus, and that is the appropriate use of that station. And I think when you're talking about how do we make a welcoming environment, it's how do we make a welcoming environment to appropriate uses of our transit riders.
Yeah, so for Metro Transit, when I think of stations, what I'm thinking about are on our light rail lines, we have platforms, none of which are gated, as I mentioned earlier. We also have this on your honor system where you buy payment and you're supposed to keep the proof of payment with you, but that you never go through a gate or a turnstile. So that's our light rail. We're also expanding our bus rapid transit program, which is also off-board payment. And so those are shelters. They tend to be more highly designed, more amenity shelters with light, heat, emergency call buttons. And so that's kind of that infrastructure too. I would say in general, when we look at this question of facilities, well, one of our public facility managers likes to say, we designed our system for use, not abuse. And we've really seen a rise in abuse over the last few years. And in part, it's for people who aren't coming and going through our systems, but rather staying there for non-transit purposes. So one element of addressing that at some of our highest ridership locations, as I mentioned earlier, we started contracting for supplemental security to have a steady presence at some of those locations to help deter behavior that's leading to some of the destruction that really give people the signal it's unsafe. So when you see broken glass, when you see graffiti, when things are just unclean, we know that's signifying to people that this space is not as well regulated as we'd like it to be. So certainly that's been a component of what we've looked at. As we developed our safety and security action plan, we learned there were more opportunities when we're renovating our facilities or getting ready to build new ones to have input early from facilities workers and police officers about design features that might serve one purpose might also have some unintended consequences when it comes from a public safety perspective. So making sure we're building in their perspectives too. Another piece, we actually have a study underway looking at our existing light rail platforms to look at peer agencies and identify, are there more steps we can be taking, really again, that crime prevention through environmental design notion. And finally, I'll mention, we also have a public art program, and we find that when we have public art at stations on surfaces, it does deter graffiti, does deter vandalism, and it also is a way to partner with the community to make it feel like a shared space, that it's part of the community, has community ownership over it, and I'd like to imagine that that helps it stay looking and feeling safer as well.
Great. Cleanliness also adds to that perception of safety. We hear that constantly when, at least for me, when I'm speaking to, agencies all throughout the country. For each of your organizations, what is necessary in your mind to maintain the degree of cleanliness that is required and requested by our riding public?
Yeah. So I'll start. One other piece of our legislative session last year, and I thought it was interesting that the state senator was talking about funding and how this question of public safety on transit and the perception of safety on transit intersects with those conversations. Our legislature established a new funding source for transportation in our region, some of which goes to transit, just at its last session. It also passed, in addition to some of the public safety policy I've talked about thus far, a requirement that we establish cleaning and repair standards for vehicles and facilities. And that really was coming out of a frustration with us that we are not keeping up with the cleanliness and the repair that people expect. So that process, that requirement to set standards is work we're actively working through now. We sent our initial report to the legislature outlining how we plan to do that. It's requiring us to hire more people, but also really redesign some of our business processes, ranging from how customers and employees can report problems in the moment and we get them in a timely way so we can dispatch people to take care of them, to just having more preventative maintenance, making sure we're cleaning the right places at the right intervals and so forth. So that's a long way to say, like, this is an area that's very much a work in progress for us, but we do hear loud and clear that, especially with this increased investment in transit, there are increased expectations, and cleanliness is a part of that.
I think two things I'd like to add from the cleanliness topic is one, a lot of this, I think we kind of intuitively know, but we've seen it based on the work that we've done at our pilot station, MacArthur Park, is that cleanliness isn't necessarily a lack of custodians. There are a subset of people who are inappropriately using the stations and disproportionately causing issues of cleanliness in our system. And so rather than just hiring more custodians and cleaning up minutes afterwards, we're getting spills on the platform and things thrown onto the track, so on and so forth. We really need to kind of think a little bit deeper to that, and how do we make sure that those that are causing the cleanliness issues are not encouraged to do that we don't create that. And that goes back again to the access control and the environmental design interventions. I think in a public space where the public is invited, if it's unclear, the public at large does not have the agency to control other people's behavior. We know that. And so because of that, it can invite illicit activity. And illicit activity disincentivizes other people, especially people with other mobility options, to go somewhere else. And so something that we had seen historically pre-pandemic on rail in LA, we had 52% of our rail ridership was women riding the trains. That number has dropped to 44% of our total rail ridership is women riding on the trains. We've talked to them, a lot of them have said, we've moved over to the bus. We don't feel safe, we don't know if I'm bringing my child, I don't know what my child's gonna see in the elevator. I don't know necessarily what the conditions might be on the train or on the platform. And so those are the opportunities for us to shore up on the environmental design side paired with the human-centered approach. And when we did that, even without an increase in custodians, we actually saw a significant improvement in cleanliness conditions, a reduction in vandalism. And the second thing I wanted to talk about, and I think is always a big topic in every city, is public restrooms. So public restrooms, we are piloting. We have a few that are the traditional full-service restrooms. They're very expensive to maintain. They require security to make sure appropriate activity. But we are piloting a new product called the Throne. And that's their name. The startup is called the Throne. And we have 4 locations that we're piloting right now. And they require a cell phone to be able to use to open the door. And then like any other automated public restroom, the doors will open after 10 minutes. What we have seen there is over 13, in just like the first, I think, 2 months of operation, we had over 13,000 uses out of the 4 locations. We had a 4.4 star rating out of 5 stars on cleanliness that users reported themselves, and we had 0 major incidents that took the units out of service, which we know is oftentimes a thorn on the side of major agencies. And so we know, just like when you go to a library and you need to take a book on loan, you need a library card. You can't just walk out with the book, right? And so it's a very similar thing, and we were confident that this digital divide was narrowing because our latest survey showed 94% of our riders now have cell phones. There's Lifeline programs in the state of California that provide cell phone access to basically anyone who has access to cell phones. So that has been a huge success story that we've seen on the customer experience side. But on the cleanliness side, we've actually seen at the 4 locations we've tested a 50% reduction in public urination and defecation incidents. And so we see this as an investment of not only improving options for customers, because we know our system is expanding. You miss a transfer, you may need to go, but also that it can actually help our custodians work better. They can fan out to other parts of the system and not focus on areas that we shouldn't need to be dealing with.
I tell you, when I saw the picture of the Throne, I actually wanted one in my home because it really is beautiful. If you get a chance, go on the website. It's you're always leading the industry with all your creative initiatives. So I'm gonna bring you to our close now. I want to pick up on something that Senator Willie Valland said in terms of looking at the success of all of our efforts, right, and looking at holistic approaches. Clearly what you've heard here today is what is within the control of our transit systems. But in order for us to address this societal problem, we need all the players at the table. So I was just curious if you could, because we're gonna go into the convening later on, if you can talk about, how do we engage or where do we engage with the broader public in addressing the root causes of what's causing this issue? lack of affordable housing, all those other conditions. So that way, as we think about what we're doing, right, who else we need at the table, and how might they come and support our efforts?
Well, at Metro Transit, this is another area we are really actively looking to grow and become stronger at. I will say through the Transit Service Intervention Project that I mentioned earlier, the legislature really expected us to reach out to counties, to cities, also some state agencies, to start a more ongoing dialogue about how we work together. So I think that's been helpful. It's still pretty early on. A more concrete example that I'll mention is, so as we brought on additional layers of presence, especially our supplemental security at key locations, as a transit agency, I think it's fair to say that's not going to solve problems, it's going to move problems. And so part of what we've done through our community affairs department is reach out to businesses, local elected officials, other potential partners around those sites to convene a conversation about, are there ways we can get more upstream here? So we're not just moving it off our area into somebody else's, but trying to galvanize more of a coalition to get to those root causes. Now, I don't think we're there yet, but I think starting to frame it and conceptualize it in that way is helpful, and I'm looking forward to us continuing down that path.
Stephen?
Yeah, I think I would just close with the collaboration's incredibly important. I think similarly in Chicago, as is the case in Los Angeles, there are a lot of different jurisdictions to go across. With that, we need to be able to keep at it. That's part of our C3 approach. I also want to emphasize that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to resolving these societal challenges. As I mentioned with our homeless outreach program, it's five-pronged. And that's because we have very nuanced issues, and you don't use the same tool for a different issue. And that's why we are learning as we go along. But I also want to emphasize, I think, as we go along through this new station experience unit, is that you cannot let perfect be the enemy of the good. So as you're convening all of the different agencies and the CBOs and regulatory groups, that you understand that there may not be a perfect solution, or if you're waiting for it, you may not be able to implement things that can save lives today. And so that is why I think we're really excited to be able to share a lot of the successes and maybe not successes that we've had in Los Angeles, but we're willing to try, and we have elected officials that are willing to let us, to give us that looser leash to be able to do that.
Great. Please help me thank our panelists for a wonderful job. We're going to open it up to you. Any questions? We can take up to 3 questions. Don't all jump at once. Okay, you're gonna, Kyle's getting to you.
Thank you, panelists. I have a question for the woman from Minnesota. Sorry, I'm forgetting your name and your title. You mentioned they had like a Minnesota Innovative. There was some type of bill that you mentioned earlier that like worked on doing a lot of innovation around transportation, officers and transit safety. I don't know if I'm using the right words, but I was really interested in the program and what the name was, and wondering how that could be replicated here in Illinois.
And I'll admit, I'm not hearing that question very clearly. Is it essentially?
Leslie, I think she was referring to the intervention plan.
Sure, the intervention project. Yes, okay, thank you. So this was one of the provisions that our state legislature passed last year. In the same bill, actually, is the additional sales tax funding for transit. And the concept was it was going to start as a 1-year project. It required us as a transit agency to work with the State Department of Human Services, the State Department of Public Safety, the state patrol. On a county level, it required us to reach out to the 2 counties through which we had light rail lines. It also required us to reach out to the 3 cities that have light rail in their jurisdiction. It also had us work with the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Minnesota and the primary labor union at Metro Transit. So that was the first part of the intervention project. Was the idea was the legislature wanted to see us convene all those partners to see what could be done. So it didn't really specify next steps other than get people together. Kind of from that, the other piece that came with that intervention project was a $2 million one-time appropriation from the state general fund to actually pay for social service outreach, and it also allowed for additional law enforcement and code and conduct enforcement on the system as well. We put more emphasis towards the social service outreach and connections part. So we now have 10 different organizations who are holding contracts with us, providing outreach or connections to services on our light rail system. So they started late last year. In some cases, they're still building up their staff capacity, but the idea is from 7 in the morning till 10 at night on light rail, we'll have groups of organizations out there interacting with customers, building relationships. And part of when I've talked to people who are part of the organizations we're contracting with, they share with me that they often have to meet people multiple times before they're ready and have built that trust to potentially connect them to services. So it's very much early and ongoing work. So I hope that helped, but I'm happy to talk to you more too with more details.
I would add that bringing those diverse stakeholders to the table is so crucial to break silos because sometimes, we push the problem around, right?
Yes, yeah.
The airport would, shut their doors and then they'll get on the buses and they'll go to the stations and vice versa. So having all those stakeholders at the table really helps with, owning the problem and looking at solutions holistically. Another question?
Hi, I'm Julia Garasimenko from the Active Transportation Alliance. Thanks for sharing all your insights. I'm wondering, building off of that question, is that bill something that you all lobbied for, or were there elected official champions? And then the second part is, do you all have a strategy in working with other types of agency partners or municipal partners? Do you expect to go after kind of multidisciplinary legislation to kind of address those underlying issues like affordable housing, et cetera?
Yeah, those are great questions. In terms of the actual legislative language itself, it was not an agency initiative, but we were supportive of it. It was introduced by a legislator who is a strong public transit proponent and very much wanted to see more action in this area and more multi-partner, multi-jurisdictional, multi-responsibility sector action. And so that idea came from the legislators, but we're supportive of it and are learning a lot from it. And I think where we really need to go next is, how do we as a transit agency fit into the broader policy realm as it relates to the issues you're mentioning: affordable housing, substance use disorder, untreated mental illness. I think there's a lot of systems that really, what we see on transit reflects what's happening in these other spaces. And so that's an area that I'm hoping, as we do this transit service intervention project, we learn more about how what we're seeing on transit is really fitting into and is a result of some of those broader systemic challenges.
I would add that the other opportunity for us, and since we have a couple of legislators here, is that there's a lot of funding that comes to the states that transit systems don't have access to, and that funding is from the HUD, the Housing of Urban Development. Centers for Medicare, Medicaid, they fund a lot of funding that comes through the different states for the issue of addressing mental health, behavioral health. And so I think for us, the opportunity would be that, to the extent that someone can advocate for us, right, to be able to have a piece of those resources and funding, I think that would be another good area. Medicaid just recently passed, and they're approving using Medicaid funding for providing housing for individuals, their members who are on Medicaid who are experiencing homelessness. So, that's still in a pilot format, but I think we're making some progress related to that. So any advocacy that you could do on behalf of the regional transit systems, I think it will go a long way.
Hi, I'm Brandon McFadden. I'm with Commuters Take Action, a grassroots advocacy organization here in the Chicago region. This one's more for LA Metro. You had mentioned on station entrances, you only have 45% coverage as far as like fare control goes for those stations, and kind of the lighting upgrades you're doing within those stations to help kind of disperse the heavy boarding that might happen. Are you noticing that those lighting improvements are actually helping on the platform? Are you doing any kind of additional station announcements or operator-made announcements from the trains to kind of help disperse that boarding throughout the train, as opposed to kind of those heavy focus areas towards the middle or towards the entrances?
Yeah, I think all of the above. We've really been taking a multi-prong approach to those design interventions, and I think not all stations, need the bright lighting. There's a lot of outdoor stations that, naturally are going to be fine during the day, but then there's some that are under freeway overpasses or highway overpasses, and so those are opportunities for us to upgrade. We have a campaign to swap out the old fluorescents that turn yellow over time with the 30-year LEDs that last a lot longer. We've also seen the move towards more of a daylight hue that is moving away from like the soft yellow white and moving towards more of the daylight hue has a number of benefits. It keeps you more alert for riders to be able to see something and say something. It also helps with our visually impaired passengers in terms of color rendering and to be able to know which line or which side of the train they need to be boarding on. So we're taking those both on board the trains as well as at our stations. But I think it's really all of it blended together is really kind of the key to to this entire success.
One last question.
Hi, my name's Nick Hunder. I'm also with Commuters Take Action. Another question for LA Metro, kind of similar to Brandon's actually. So you're talking about access control points, and I was kind of curious, how do you identify those areas? Like what type of area required access control, and kind of the reasons for those reasons?
Yeah, so one of the challenges that we have, especially with a number of our stations, is we are not, our rail system is not a 24/7 system. So I know the blue and red line here, run all night. And so our stations do close at night. The way we close our stations is we have roll gates, but they're at the bottom of the escalator landing. What that does between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. is it invites all sorts of activity that's kind of out of plain sight from the sidewalk or the street down into the bottom of that landing. And it also creates difficulties for us to safely open the station. The station entrance is incredibly dirty. In some cases, it's vandalized. The roll gates are vandalized. And so part of that is being able to better secure the station at our property line to be able to bring it up to the surface. Because one of these mornings last year, we actually had an excessive amount of vandalism at MacArthur Park at the roll gate that we couldn't even open the station roll gates in the morning. And so legitimate passengers who were trying to get on the first train at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, could not quickly and safely get through there, and we had to prop it up with a ladder until we were able to fix it. And so It's those kind of opportunities that really allow us to better control the area to make sure that it's designed for appropriate use, that it's designed for a quick and safe way to be able to get into the train or the bus. And that's really, again, getting back to the basics, and then we can get to the other stuff after that. But I think that's what we've heard loud and clear from our actual riders when we've surveyed them in person, is that's what's moving the needle for them.
So thank you so much. Again, help me thank Leslie and Stephen for bringing their subject matter expertise and their lived experiences here to the great region of Chicago. And again, Leanne, thank you so much for the invitation to join here and moderate this panel. Have a great evening.
Hi, I'm Tina Fassett-Smith. I'm the Director of Communications at the RTA. We're so glad to have you. Thank you, Flora, Stephen, and Lindsay. Thank you so much for your Leslie, I'm so sorry, for your expertise. I want to just quickly let you know about logistics of the day. We're going to take a 10-minute break before you get up. There is still lunch boxes. If you didn't get lunch, please grab one. There's also some snacks. There's fruit, there's trail mix, there's cookies, there's drinks and coffee. So please refresh yourself, take 10 minutes. There'll be chimes to let you know to come back in. Please come back. The second half of the second half of our day is really as important as the first half because we get to hear from you and focus on solutions and challenges and how we can meet them together. So please do come back. Make sure to sit at your assigned table because, as Leanne explained, your assignment matters as far as how we want to situate your expertise. So thank you, and listen for those chimes, and we will start again in just a few minutes. And if you didn't get a question answered, don't worry, we'll have time for question and feedback throughout the day. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Maulik Vaishnav. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Planning and Capital Programming at the RTA. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks in advance for engaging in your breakout groups in just a few minutes, where we will spend the rest of our afternoon together coming up with some lists of solutions for 2024. We just heard some great insights from and initiatives from Minneapolis and Los Angeles that made one thing clear: Chicago is not alone in tackling these issues on public transit. Additionally, transit's future from a funding perspective depends on us making progress in this area among many other areas. The rest of the agenda will guide us in that direction. But first, we just wanted to level set for everybody and take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of our local issues. So this quick presentation will help connect the dots between everything you've heard so far and some of what our riders have told the four agencies, RTA, CTA, Metra, and PACE, through our rider surveys. Some of that came up in the panel about the things you have seen, so it won't be that surprising and probably go a little bit faster than we anticipated. There's tons of data to look at, but we have curated a few slides, so thank you to our service boards for providing a lot of the data that we have summarized here. Next slide, please. So first, let's look at some regional survey results. So RTA has a survey panel of thousands of riders who take one or more of the three agency services. Here are some results from a recent survey where we asked about public safety collectively on CTA, Metra, and PACE. I want to quickly emphasize that our frontline employees are also part of the same issues, and that came up, but just wanted to flag that while we talk about rider surveys, our employees many times feel some of the same pressures. So this first slide you see here is when we asked the panel what makes them feel less safe on transit, we heard that the greatest concern was with dangerous behavior. So 70% felt much less safe because of dangerous behavior from other riders, substance abuse, and damaged and dirty facilities. Some other issues had more neutral feelings than the top four you see here. One complexity you will notice throughout this presentation is that even at statistically significant results, as in point in time, as we do these surveys every 6 months, every quarter, different things pop up to the top. So you'll see as we go into CTA, Metra, and PACE's results, some of the same things may not show up as the top 3 things. So that makes our job even more complicated. But there are some items that bubble up to the top, and these data points are what we use to determine what the breakout group's topics will be. Next slide, please. When we asked what would make you feel safe to ride transit, we got many responses that represent operational changes that are within our control. Frequent and reliable service coming out at the top. Cleanliness, lighting, police, and other people riding transit also impacted people's perception of feeling safe. You can see how many people are attaching safety with reliable and frequent service. We believe this stems from longer wait times since the pandemic in some areas as we try to add service back across the region, but also because lower ridership recovery during certain times of day and at certain locations adds to that feeling of waiting in areas that people are not generally familiar waiting at. People were more ambivalent towards some other strategies listed here. For example, private security is not seen as favorably as police presence, and people were largely neutral towards transit ambassadors. Next slide, please. We also asked our operating agencies, so thank you Metra, PACE, and CTA for providing some insights that you're allowing me to share on your behalf here, and we have made some tweaks here and there to quickly summarize the information. But this chart represents data from Metra surveys that shows a fairly consistent feeling of personal safety before and after the pandemic, especially related to operations of trains. There's a little dip post-pandemic in station and onboard safety, but the overall satisfaction remains about 80% on all metrics. Next slide, please. Similarly, PACE's survey results have seen a little dip in satisfaction with personal security and different bus attributes, but the PACE riders also generally feel as safe as they did before the pandemic. Next slide, please. CTA quarterly survey data has many insights for us as well, but the key here is lower satisfaction on the train and at train stations waiting for trains. This ties closely with one of the previous slides where behavior of others on transit impacted the perception of safety for our riders, especially when the wait times are longer or you're on the rail car and feel kind of stuck with other people that you might not want to, you may not feel safe with. CT also mentioned that riders have noted in the surveys that waiting at night makes people feel unsafe, was the most selected reason for dissatisfaction with personal security, followed by not enough CTA personnel present and not enough CPD present. Riders selected that other passengers using alcohol, tobacco, or drugs while on board CTA vehicles makes them feel unsafe as the top reason for dissatisfaction with personal security, which was 20 points higher than the second biggest attribute. So that really is having a negative impact on many riders. CT also has many data points on bus networks, but riders are generally more satisfied, and there's a correlation with having that official presence we talked about. There are many forms of that presence, but the bus operator kind of serves as that presence on every bus. Next slide, please. One of the questions CTA asked riders was to weigh in on potential solutions, and they were supposed to be ranked. There were 11 solutions offered, and the number one was direct outreach to reduce homelessness, mental health, and substance issues on the system. So this will be part of the conversation you will have in the breakout groups in just a little bit. The second highest ranked was fewer passengers using alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. So in some cases, better station lighting, which rose a little bit higher on the RTA survey, was not as big of a factor for CTA. Partly many stations have seen those upgrades, so then it becomes less of a priority for the riders. Probably means it's working. Next slide, please. We also wanted to highlight many efforts are underway at the three agencies before we break out into our breakout groups. Representatives from each agency will likely be at your table, and they will be happy to expand upon some of the items that are underway. This is not an exhaustive list. The three agencies are doing a lot of work, but we wanted to showcase a few important items. For Metra, there's the new code of conduct policy for riders, a COPS app to report incidents, officers who carry Narcan, and de-escalation training for frontline employees. PACE also offers similar training to their frontline employees with additional investments in operator safety, bus familiarization training with first responders, and other initiatives, including a new campaign that will be going live soon about our operators being also human, and operating our bus is only half of who they are and what they do. CT is focused on mitigating transit worker assaults, so that will come up in one of the breakout groups, investing in social service agency partnerships on red and blue lines that operate 24/7, and partnerships with DFSS to house the unhoused, on top of many technology and coordination activities with the CPD. Some progress is also being made to find shelters or housing placements. There's also a new health vending machine in partnership with CDPH at 95th Red Line Station. So as you discuss ideas and solutions in your facilitated sessions, in your breakout groups, we want to make sure you have all this background info on many of the things that are currently going on. Next slide, please. So here we are. These are the... Here's a little bit more information on the three topics of the breakout groups. So obviously there are more tables than the number of topics, so some of the tables will be discussing the same topic. And there will be facilitators at your table who will sort of guide you through the conversation. The three breakout topics that Leanne mentioned at the start of the summit will focus on crime and perception of crime on transit, social service solutions for transit, so thinking about all the I would say all these social service concepts that are happening outside of transit. How do we get partnership with those agencies to make sure transit is part of their work and solution? And the third one, again, we talked about is welcoming station and stop environments where RTA staff can expand upon the new grant program where we will be providing grants for station activations for later this year. With that, we have time, about 5 to 10 minutes, for any questions before we break into breakout groups. And if not, you'll have more time in your breakout groups. Nice. Well, with that, I will turn it over to our partners who will walk you through the breakout group process. And we will reconvene after the breakout groups to do a readout of what we have learned from each group really quickly before final remarks from RTA's chairman. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sonia Lewis. I am with Rudd Resources, a consultant to RTA, and just wanted to welcome you all again this afternoon, and we're going to go into our group discussions now. My colleague and I, Brianna Gibson Fleming, I'm moving around. I have to get closer. I was just directed. Oh, that sounds loud. So my colleague and I, Brianna Gibson Fleming, we had the pleasure of designing the facilitation guide for this, the discussions this afternoon. And I wanted to acknowledge and thank RTA for their commitment to offering trauma-informed facilitation training for all of our facilitators and our note takers. And so with the trauma-informed facilitation, we know that some of these conversations that we're going to have this afternoon that will focus on crime and safety, we'll be talking about homelessness and some of the other difficult conversations that are related to the transit system. RTA was very intentional and committed to make sure that all of our facilitators were trained with trauma-informed facilitation training. And what that means is that they've been trained on how to create a safe space for these conversations. We've learned things about cultural sensitivity, trauma-informed language that we want to use, and just being able to make sure that everyone feels that they will be able to share their stories, and we know that that's such a privilege for you all to share your lived experiences with us this afternoon and your stories and your ideas and your solutions that we're going to talk about. So we'll have 75 minutes, and within those 75 minutes, we're going to cover, you've already done the introductions, but we're going to focus on the meeting agreements. You have those at your table, and those really set the framework for our conversations this afternoon. And after that, we'll go into the group discussions, and we'll have an opportunity for you all to tell us more about your background and your work experience, and then we'll get to the good part, which is to share some ideas with us and some holistic solutions on how to help move the transit system in our region, how to move it forward with some sustainability and really with focus on equity for all of the transit riders and for all of the people here. So we know that we have a very diverse group. We want you all to know that we are really looking forward to you sharing, and everybody's voice in here this afternoon is equal. At the end of the conversations, we also have at your team, in addition to the facilitator, we also have note takers, and they've been instructed to really listen for themes and ideas, and at the end, we'll do a report out. So each table will have 5 minutes, and within those 5 minutes, they'll be able to tell you what they talked about at their tables, what their hot topics were, some of the keen insights that they did, and what some of the solutions and ideas that they discussed. And then you'll have an opportunity to ask them questions. So Brianna and I will be walking around this afternoon while you all are having your conversations. We want to support the facilitators in any way we can. And if anyone has any questions, we're here to support that. So thank you so much, and looking forward to you all having some great conversations this afternoon.